Let me start with a question that cuts to the center of everything we've explored so far. What if human nature isn't fixed, but something we've been rewriting for thousands of years? Because think about it. Every generation inherits a story of who we are, and every generation quietly edits that story again. Some say we're born with unchanging traits, hardwired, predetermined. Others argue we're shaped by evolution, culture, and the worlds we build. But the truth is more unsettling and more hopeful. The way we describe human nature becomes the way we live it. So the real question isn't just what are humans like? It's what story are we telling about ourselves and what future does that story create? And that brings us to the crossroads we're standing at right now.
So we have these essentialist perspectives that argue that there are core unchanging traits that define what it means to be human. And then we have like dynamic evolutionary perspectives that emphasize how our understanding of human nature is constantly shifting alongside, our scientific knowledge and our cultural changes. So on the one hand, we have this idea that we're all born with certain inherent qualities. And on the other hand, we have the idea that we're constantly evolving and adapting to our environment.
Right. It's a tricky one.
It is tricky. I mean, think about how much our understanding of genetics, neuroscience, human behavior has changed just in the last century.
Absolutely.
What we consider essential about human nature today might look very different a century from now.
You're right.
It makes you wonder how much of who we are is predetermined and how much is shaped by our experiences. And that kind of brings us to this really fascinating concept of shared narratives. And this is something that Yuval Noah Harari explored in his book, Sapiens. Harari argues that stories, whether they're about gods, nations, money, or even scientific theories, have played a huge role in shaping human society.
They really have.
So these shared stories, these narratives, they help us make sense of the world and coordinate our actions. But as Harari points out, shared narratives can also be these incredibly powerful tools for manipulation and control.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Think about how propaganda, advertising, political rhetoric all rely on shaping our narratives to influence our behavior.
Yeah, it's really about framing, right? Framing a story.
These narratives, these shared stories can be a force for good or bad, depending on how they're used.
Exactly. It's like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, shared narratives have allowed us to achieve incredible things as a species. I mean, we built pyramids, we landed on the moon, but they've also been used to justify war and oppression and environmental destruction.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought.
It is.
It makes you wonder about the stories that we're telling ourselves right now, especially when it comes to global challenges like climate change.
Yeah. What are the dominant narratives that are shaping our response to that? It's a crucial question because the stories we choose to believe in the narratives we embrace about our relationship with the planet and with each other will ultimately shape the future of humanity.
This is all giving me a lot to think about. So we've covered Hegel's ideas about knowledge and consciousness, James's theory about like the evolution of the mind, and now this concept of shared narratives. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think let's delve deeper into those shared narratives and see how they connect to the themes of interconnectedness and collective responsibility that we talked about at the beginning. And maybe, along the way, we can start to envision what kind of stories we need to be telling ourselves if we want to create a more sustainable and enlightened future.
That sounds like a good plan. All right.
Let's do it.
So we've been talking about these big, powerful ideas, guys, the bicameral mind, shared narratives, and I'm starting to see how they all kind of point to this idea of interconnectedness. So it makes me wonder, if we're so interconnected, what does that mean for our sense of responsibility?
Yeah, that's the crux of it, isn't it? The narratives that we choose to believe in, the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and where we're going, they have a real impact on the world that we create. And that impact, extends far beyond our individual lives.
That actually reminds me of the example from Sapiens about the impact of Homo sapiens on ecosystems.
Oh yeah.
It was pretty sobering to read. The arrival of humans in a new environment often led to the extinction of megafauna.
Yeah.
Like these giant sloths and woolly mammoths.
It is a stark reminder that our actions, Even those that seem small or insignificant at the time, they can have ripple effects across time and space. We're not just responsible for our own little corner of the world. We're all part of a complex web of cause and effect.
So if we acknowledge this interconnectedness, how does that change how we approach these global challenges?
Well, for starters, I think it shifts our focus from individual responsibility to collective responsibility.
Okay.
Instead of asking, what can I do to make a difference? We start asking, what can we do together?
That seems like a much more powerful approach, but it also kind of feels daunting. To be honest, where do we even begin to tackle these issues that are so big and complex?
Well, I think a good starting point is to recognize that many of the challenges that we face are actually a consequence of our success as a species. Homo sapiens has become so dominant, so adept at manipulating the environment, that we've inadvertently created a whole new set of problems.
It's almost like we've become too good at being human. At least in the way that we've traditionally defined human.
Yeah, in the way that we've been operating.
So what do we do about that?
Well, we need to find new ways to leverage our ingenuity, our creativity, our capacity for cooperation. Instead of using our intelligence to dominate and exploit, we need to use it to find solutions that benefit all of humanity and the planet as a whole.
That sounds great in theory, but how do we actually shift from this mindset of individual gain to a more collective approach?
Well, it starts with changing the stories that we tell ourselves.
So it's about shifting from a narrative of me to a narrative of we.
Yeah.
But how do we actually make that happen?
Instead of narratives of competition and scarcity, we need narratives of cooperation and abundance. Instead of focusing on what divides us, we need to focus on what unites us.
Okay.
It requires us to be more conscious of the narratives that we're consuming and creating. What messages are we absorbing from the media, from our social circles, from our political leaders? Are those narratives reinforcing a sense of separation and fear? Or are they promoting understanding and empathy?
So we need to be more critical of the information that we're taking in and more intentional about the stories that we're choosing to share.
Exactly. And we also need to actively seek out narratives that inspire us, that offer a vision of a future where humanity thrives in harmony with nature and with each other.
So it's not just about changing our minds, right? It's about changing our hearts as well.
Exactly. We need to cultivate a sense of awe and wonder, a deep appreciation for the interconnectedness of all life, and we need to translate that understanding into action.
That makes a lot of sense, but I think a lot of people feel really overwhelmed by the scale of the challenges that we face.
I get that.
It's easy to get stuck in this cycle of despair and inaction.
Yeah.
So how do we move beyond that?
Well, it's true. The problems can seem insurmountable.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that we're not starting from scratch. Throughout history, humans have faced seemingly impossible challenges and found ways to overcome them. We have this incredible capacity for innovation, for resilience, for collective action.
So we need to tap into that collective power, that sense of shared purpose. How do we do that?
Well, one way is to focus on the solutions that are already emerging. There are countless individuals and organizations around the world working on innovative approaches to climate change, to social justice, to sustainable development. We need to amplify their voices, support their efforts, and create a sense of momentum that inspires others to get involved.
So it's about highlighting the positive, the things that are working, and building on those successes.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing that we don't have all the answers. We need to be willing to experiment, to learn from our mistakes, and to adapt our approaches as we go.
That sounds like a much more hopeful and empowering way to approach these challenges than just focusing on the doom and gloom.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance between acknowledging the urgency of the situation and cultivating a sense of optimism and possibility.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of shifting our narratives, of focusing on collective action, of highlighting solutions. But I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, this idea that the challenges we face are in some ways a consequence of our success as a species. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Think about it.
Our intelligence, our creativity, our ability to adapt and innovate. These are the very qualities that have allowed Homo sapiens to thrive and spread across the globe. Yet these same qualities have also led us to create systems and technologies that now threaten the delicate balance of the planet. It's a paradoxical situation.
It is. Yeah. So it's not about rejecting those qualities, but about finding a way to use them more wisely, more ethically.
Precisely.
And that's where this conversation about human nature becomes so crucial. If we believe that humans are inherently selfish, greedy, and destructive, then it's hard to imagine a future where we can overcome these challenges.
But if we acknowledge that our nature is more complex, that we also have the capacity for empathy and altruism and cooperation, then perhaps there's hope.
We need to rewrite the story of human nature, not just the story of humanity.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we rewrite the story of human nature?
Well, one way is to broaden our understanding of what it means to be human. For too long, our perspective has been shaped by a narrow, Western-centric worldview. But if we look to indigenous cultures, to ancient wisdom traditions, to the countless ways that humans have lived and thrived in harmony with nature, we might discover a richer, more hopeful understanding of our potential.
So it's about recognizing that there are other ways of being in the world, other ways of relating to each other and to the planet.
Exactly.
And by exploring these different perspectives, we can begin to imagine new possibilities, new ways of living that are more sustainable, more just, and ultimately more fulfilling.
That reminds me of something I read about the capabilities approach to human development. Instead of just focusing on economic growth or material wealth, it emphasizes what people are able to do and to be.
That's a powerful insight. If we want to create a truly sustainable and enlightened future, we need to move beyond those narrow definitions of progress and success. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of human beings do we want to be?
And those questions bring us right back to the power of narratives.
They do.
Think about it. Every great civilization, every movement, every breakthrough started with a story, a vision, a shared belief in what was possible. The stories we choose to believe in will ultimately shape the world that we create. If we want to build a better future, we need to tell better stories. And the question is, what stories are we telling ourselves now? Are they stories of division and fear? Or stories of unity, progress, and hope? What if we changed the story? What if we dared to imagine a different future? History has shown this time and again. The Renaissance, the Civil Rights Movement, the Space Age. They all began with a shift in narrative, a story that challenged the status quo.
And those stories, as we've seen, need to acknowledge our interconnectedness, our shared responsibility, and the complex, ever-evolving nature of what it means to be human.
You're really blowing my mind here.